Hello, everybody. Sorry about that. Thank you for coming. My name's Daniel Gross. I'm an editor at the Asian American Writers Workshop, where you are. And I'm a reporter who covers prisons. So once again, thank you for coming. We've got a table of book donations in the back. So if you've brought your paperback books and you want to put them in the boxes, please feel free. We've got bubble tea in the corner, as well as some soft drinks. We're making a second batch of bubble tea as I speak. And there's, if you didn't bring any books to donate, but you want to donate money for postage, there's a little bowl over here, and that will be used to pay for the cost of shipping books into prisons. So we're here tonight to celebrate Books Through Bars, donate books, and also to inaugurate a project here at the Asian American Writers Workshop called A World Without Cages. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but first I wanted to introduce our co-host, Vicki Law. Come on up, Vicki. Vicki is a longtime friend of the workshop, a journalist on the prison system for many years, the author of Resistance Behind Bars, The Struggles of Incarcerated Women, and the co-founder of Books Through Bars, NYC.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out, for schlepping out in this heat. Let's take this down. For schlepping out in this heat and for bringing your books. If you did not bring books, feel free to leave a donation. Bring books later. If you did bring books and you're feeling generous, feel free to leave a donation. I've just been told when I stopped being an active member of Books Through Bars back in 2010, we got between 400 and 500 requests from people in prisons across the United States every month. And now that number has doubled to 900 to 1,000 letters from people asking for books each month. So postage is expensive. So thank you again for coming. So we plan for tonight to hear from people who are both currently incarcerated in the form of their letters to Books Through Bars, as well as folks who are formerly incarcerated about the importance of books to them, and to have some mixing and some mingling. And of course, as Daniel mentioned, there is bubble tea and refreshments in the back, and feel free to join us. Thanks.
Thanks, Vicki. So I wanted to just talk very briefly about the project that we're founding here at the Asian American Writers Workshop. It's called A World Without Cages, and it's a project that will bring together voices from prisons, from jails, from immigrant detention, and use literature to make those connections. This event is a chance to meet other writers and activists who might get involved with that project. There's formerly incarcerated writers here. There's creative writers. There's many prison activists. And this project aims to help Asian Americans in particular see incarceration as a part of their story and a part of their history. We have a few other goals as a project. We want to build a bridge between mass incarceration and immigrant detention. These are conversations that often happen separately. And we think that in this moment, this historic moment in American history, they have to be talked about together. We also want to publish creative work that is by and about incarcerated people. So we'll be publishing stories on our website in our magazine, The Margins, that are written by people who are currently incarcerated, who are currently detained. And we'll be publishing some journalistic work and some creative work that imagines what a world might look like if it didn't have cages, if it didn't have mass incarceration. So I wanted to give Vicki a chance to talk a bit about Books Through Bars, the organization, how it was founded, and then we're going to read some letters from folks who were and are incarcerated.
Hey again. So Books Through Bars was founded in 1996. So I guess we're now on our 22nd year, I think. If somebody can double check my math, that would be great. So it was originally started as a way to send books to people in prison because there is no mandate that says that prisons have to have libraries. So you can be in a prison and not have a library there. People who are in prison, prisons that do have libraries do not have to make their libraries accessible to everybody. So, I mean, if you look around this room and look at all these amazing books, and then imagine being, say, locked in one of those bathrooms without anything to read for days on end, and maybe weeks on end, or months on end, or years, or decades. And imagine what it would be like to get a package from someplace in the outside world with a book that either allows you to temporarily escape that tiny little room, or allows you to learn about something that you never had a chance to learn about, or explore something about your own history or heritage or culture. And again, just imagine how important that is. And we'll hear from folks later about exactly what that looks like for people. So Books Through Bars started in 1996. We wanted to send books directly to people in prison. We wanted to send books that aren't necessarily books that the prison libraries would, if they existed, would stock. So for those of you who may have visited prisons or jails at some point, you may notice that the books are kind of ratty. If you go to a women's prison or jail and there is a library, oftentimes it is filled with romance novels and not very much else, except for maybe an outdated textbook or two. And there is just not a lot of selection, and people who work in the prison libraries are not necessarily going to be donating things that are thought-provoking. They're definitely not going to be soliciting books that are going to make people think about the reasons, the systemic injustices that landed them in prison and the systemic injustices in the outside world, and we wanted to be able to provide that kind of literature to people inside as well. So it started as a small project to send books to people in prison, and it rapidly grew because the number of people in prison has grown to about 2.2 million people. And as I said earlier, when I left, we got between 400 and 500 letters per month. So that was 400 to 500 individual requests from individual people locked up across the United States. And that number has since doubled. Books Through Bars operates a few times a week out of a bookstore in Brooklyn called Freebird Books. It always welcomes the group always needs volunteers to come help open the letters, answer the letters, match up people's requests for the books that are donated, and pack those up and get them ready to mail out. And now I want to introduce to you, so I stopped actively volunteering at Books Through Bars in 2010, and I've passed the baton on to other people. And I want to introduce to you Danny Shafer, who is one of the people who had the baton passed on to him. Thank you, Danny, so much for picking up my slack, and he'll tell you how it works now.
Thank you. All right, so I'm not going to add too much to the background of Books Through Bars because Vicki and Daniel have largely covered it. We meet at Freebird Books. Wow. I'm not good with my. We meet at Freebird Books, which is at 123 Columbia in Carroll Gardens, Red Hook, Columbia Heights. Pick your neighborhood name, but that's the address. We meet on Mondays from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m., Sundays 2 to 5 p.m., most Wednesdays 7 to 9. If you come on a Wednesday, I would suggest you check our website first, which is booksthroughbarsnyc.org, all the words except for NYC written out. And aside from reiterating the thanks for everyone for being here and for the books, for the funds to pay for the postage, I'm going to stop talking, and if anybody has a question for me later on, I'll be happy to answer it privately.
Thank you very much, Danny Shafer. So we're coming now to the letter reading portion of the evening. And to start off, I just wanted to tell a really quick story about how I got involved in prison journalism. And it's a story that also involves letters. It's a story I was working on for The New Yorker, called the Encyclopedia Reader. So back in 2004, a guy named Robin Woods is in prison in Maryland. He's spent already many years in prison, and as a kid, he dropped out of school very early, and he never learned to read. He said that when he arrived in prison, he had never completed a book. But in prison, he was given a copy of a Mario Puzo novel, the guy who wrote The Godfather. And here's this mafia novel, and he's like, this seems pretty cool. So he starts reading with help from a dictionary. He sounds out the words, he takes 5 minutes to finish a page, and by the end of the novel, he has a basic grasp of what a sentence looks like and how to read the next novel. So a few years pass, and he gets his hands on a copy of the Merriam-Webster Encyclopedia. And he reads entries in the Merriam-Webster Encyclopedia with the goal of finishing the entire thing, taking this universe that is inside a book and consuming it, putting it into his brain. And while he's reading through, he comes to an entry on Baghdad in the 11th century. And there's a mistake in the entry. He recognizes the mistake. And this is the letter that he writes. It's addressed to Mark A. Stevens, editor, Merriam-Webster's. He works in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dear Mr. Stevens, I am writing to you at this time to advise you of a misprint in your fine, 2 exclamation points, collegiate encyclopedia. Please note page 1624 under Togreel Beg, line number 8. It reads, in 1955, he entered Baghdad. But it should read, in 1055, he entered Baghdad. Please note, sir, that I am the very proud owner of your collegiate encyclopedia, collegiate dictionary, and Webster's New World Dictionary, 3rd college edition. Not only do I love all 3 of these great books, but I would be lost without them, whereas I am self-educated. Nevertheless, I enjoy catching your misprint, and I hope that I am the first one to have pointed it out. Most respectfully, your friend, Robin Woods. So Mark Stevens received this letter, and he wrote a response, and they ended up writing more than 20 letters each to each other over the course of a few years. And at the end of that time, Robin's books were taken away. He was being disciplined. And this upset Mark Stevens. And so Mark started writing letters to the prison system. And one day he got a call from the Commissioner of Corrections for all of Maryland. And they chatted for half an hour. Mark talked about the letters he'd received from Robin. And a few weeks later, Robin was informed that he was being offered a special early release program, and that if 1 year passed without any disciplinary action taken against him, he would be released. So in the course of this story, I met Robin, who was formerly incarcerated, and he met Mark Stevens in person in Massachusetts. So I thought that was one way of explaining what books can mean to a person who's incarcerated. And we have a bunch more letters to read, so I want to invite Vicki back up to the stage to start that off.
Dear Books Through Bars, there's a whole bunch of things about how to send the book in, which Danny can describe to you later if you are really interested in the nuts and bolts. But here's the more interesting part of the letter. You are the only way I have an opportunity to better myself, to educate myself through reading, because Arkansas, where the letter writer was imprisoned, offers nothing to any prisoner who is housed in solitary confinement. I'm going to pause here. How many of you know what solitary confinement is? All right. So for those of you who may not know, solitary confinement is what I described earlier, which is when you are locked in that little bathroom, pick whichever one is smaller, for 23 and a half hours a day at the very least. You're supposed to be able to come out for 1 hour a day. Solitary confinement, it can be used as a punishment because you broke a prison rule. It can be used as a punishment because prison staff does not like you. It can be used as punishment because you tried to report being sexually assaulted or physically assaulted. It can be used as a quote-unquote form of protection if prison staff think that you are in danger of being assaulted. But also, it can be because they don't like you. So people spend at least 23 hours, sometimes the full 24 hours each day, locked in a very, very small cell with the toilet and sink and a metal bunk with nothing to read or nothing to do. Back to the letter. I lost everything when I came to prison. I'm indigent, but I'm reaching out to you and everyone I believe can help me during this recovery process, as I am on the right path to my future success. Thank you for whatever literature you send and for your time that you have volunteered to answer this request from me and from any and all other prisoners as well around the world. May the year bring you, your organization, and all of the many loving and caring volunteers the most peace and prosperity ever.
You can stay after. You have another one? Hello, good folks of Books Through Bars. I am writing to you to let you know I appreciate the books you sent me a little while ago. I read a lot, and it makes my time go by faster. I'm 58, and I have 21 more years to go. You know, I will die in this house that makes folks rich here in Texas richer. I have 19 years flat in now. I hope that Texas never finds the people who did what I'm here for their doing. Prison makes people bitter. And here in Texas, they don't care who did what. Just put someone behind bars and close that case. Tell me if it is like that in New York. I would really like to know. Thanks again.
This is a letter that came to us in 2002, on May 9th, 2002. At the time, we got several hundred letters each month. Maybe not 400 to 500, but several hundred. So sometimes we did not get around to opening or answering letters for a few months after they arrived in our mailbox. So we opened this letter sometime a few months after it was sent in May of 2002. And it was a card, and it said, "Dear Sir, I would like to thank you for the books that you sent me last month. I am going to be executed on May 30th, but I'd like you to know that those books will give me much pleasure in the days remaining to me. Yours truly, Stan Baker." And we opened that letter after he had been executed. And we went to the computer and we found out that yes, indeed, he was executed on May 30th. So the power of the book is that he, in his last 21 days, awaiting his death, the death that he knew he was going to, the execution he knew was going to happen, at least he had something that allowed him to temporarily escape.
This letter says, "I'm free. Thank you for all the books. Thank you for helping me leave this place and enter another world. Thank you for caring for me." Now I wanted to invite some others up here to read letters and also talk about their own stories. So to start, I wanted to bring Jay Toole up to the stage, a friend of Books Through Bars, and she has a letter here and also wants to talk a little bit about her experience.
Oh, I need your arm.
Yeah, of course. You can sit if you want.
Hello there. Let me begin by extending my love and respect. I'm writing to you guys to give you my thanks. I got the books. It put a big smile on my face. And I started reading them immediately. And will pass them around to anyone wanting to read them. It is highly appreciated. Once again, I give you guys my thanks. It means a lot to me. Also, it's good to see and know that there's still good people out there willing to help one another. If we had more people like you guys and me, this world would be a better place. Well, I'm end this short. Don't want to be a bother. I exit like I entered with the utmost respect, respectfully. So I think that my first arrest was when I was 1963. And I've been in jails across this country from New York to California to Texas, and almost every state I've been in jail through my life. I was 15 on my first arrest, and my last arrest was in 1999, I think. You know. My first arrest, I did a lot of time in the Women's House of Detention. It's no longer there now. It's a garden, but you know that place was huge. You know, filled with women. I don't know if you've heard about this place, the Women's House of D. You know, I was there when they brought in Angela Davis and other people, but I was there, and not many books. You know, there was, you know, you could go from cell block to cell block, from floor to floor, and the COs there, you know, you'd ask them for something to read, or they'd have the newspapers, and, you know, they wouldn't give you anything. But there was one priest that would come into the facility there, and I can't think of his name, but they made a movie about him and wrote a book about him. It's called The Junkie Priest. And he used to come into prison and bail women out that were junkies, hooked on heroin. And you could ask him for a book, and he'd try to bring it on his next visit to that prison. Yeah, there was nothing. I wish to God that there's fucking that you guys were around in 63, 64. You know, that people would send books. You know, it would have been a big help. You know, there was nothing to do. You sit around in those corridors, you know, in the heat, and you know, do nothing. You know, just, you know, bide your time until you got cut loose. Anyway, I'm really thankful for you guys, and I'll help whatever I can. And again, donate your books, give some fucking money. Sorry, I curse a lot. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jay Toole. I wanted to now invite Lawrence Bartley up to the stage. There you are. Lawrence is coming to us from the Marshall Project, where he worked today.
Good evening, everyone. I'll first read this letter from someone that's incarcerated. It said, "Thank you for introducing me to a need and a chalice. These challenging but much welcome works of classics will occupy me and my fellow inmates for some time to come. We thank you and your colleagues at Books Through Bars for these donations of food for the soul and for your generosity with your time and resources." Well, I myself have a love for books. Unfortunately, I was incarcerated when I was 17 years old, and they made me do 27 years and 2 months, and I only been free for maybe about 110 days. Thank you. Thank you. I'll try to be brief, but during my incarceration, I was a very young man, and as someone else mentioned and was up here, the selection of books wasn't as plentiful as I would have liked. So I was forced to choose between what they call hood novels nowadays, books about street crimes and stuff like that, and espionage or religious books. So sometimes I would really read the religious books in order to keep me grounded, but I found myself becoming fond of espionage. And being a young man entering into the prison system, both the guards and sometimes the inmates can appear villainous to a young kid. And the espionage kind of gave me a frame of mind in order to navigate the system that I was in. So as I got older, during my 20s, my late 20s, I used to dream of the things I wanted to do, the life I wanted to live. And I got fond of love stories like Michael Baisden and Terry McMillan. Those type of stories are the ones that kept me going, because I was at the age that the characters were in the books, and I always wanted to live that lifestyle. That's one thing that prisoners have. They have hope. And books was a way of immersing myself inside that realm of hope in which I envisioned myself being out there doing the things that the protagonists and the other characters in the books were doing. As I got older, I entered into a college program, and books, for many reasons, became even more important. I had to read books and cite them as references and sources for my papers, and I learned many things throughout that period. I learned how to write as well. I learned how to write in a way in which I can read policy and I could know what's going on within the prison system. If that rule came out, I wanted to know why that rule was implemented and whether that rule applied to me. One time there was a rule that they limited our property from 8 bags to 6 bags, but the rule was supposed to take place 6 months from the day they implemented it. So I wrote a grievance and I complained about it, and I was attacked by prison guards and sent to solitary confinement. While in solitary confinement, I went to books again. The books was my way of escape while in solitary confinement. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to read my book. And I started reading books. I started ordering books. I wanted to write books. And I ordered a book called The Book of Facts so I could learn exactly the population of the big cities inside the U.S. in which I wanted to write from. And I hoped to learn the layout of different streets so I could kind of map my settings in the book and seem like I knew what I was talking about. So during that time, I kind of met up with my wife again, and through writing these books, there was a topic that I could share with her, and we ended up bonding because of that experience in solitary confinement. So although I remember solitary confinement as a negative point in my life, it has a positive point that's attached to books for the reasons I mentioned, and it was allowed me to get with my wife now. We've been together for 14 years, and we have 2 lovely children, and I can't help but think that books played a good part in doing something like that. With that, I'll end, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Next up, I wanted to bring Vidal Guzman up to the stage from Just Leadership USA, where he's a community organizer.
Thank you, everyone. AAW, American Asian Writing Workshop, for having me here. My name is Vidal Guzman. I'm a community organizer for Just Leadership USA. We're leading the Close Rikers Island campaign. It's a real pleasure to be here. So when you think about books, for someone that's detained or someone that actually did time, I was a person that was homeless at 5, 6 years old. I was living on the staircase in Washington Heights. At 8 or 9 years old, I started, selling drugs. At 14, 15 years old, I was gang related. The first time I hit Rikers Island was I was 16 years old. I never knew what Rikers Island was. Never read about it, never knew about it, but I knew it was something. But I never fell in love with books. I remember teachers telling me, you need to read a book. I'm like, why? Why I got to read a book? That ain't going to get me nowhere. And that's how I was learned. That's what society kind of taught me, or people around my neighborhood. And at 16, 17 years old, I never fell in love with books. I came home when I was 18 on probation. And at 19 years old, I spent 5 years 19 to I was 24. In and out of solitary confinement. Every 3 months, I was in solitary confinement because I was a former gang member. But I never knew what a book does until one day I remember this correctional officer. He always come pushing the cart. And I hear they were like, yo, that's the books, y'all, that's the books. And that's everyone like banging on their cell, yo, the books is coming. I'm like, why everyone happy? We still locked in here. What's everyone happy for? But when he walked in, the slot opened. And he said, the books. You want a book? I was like, all right, let me just get a book. What you got in there? He's like, I got everything, man. I'm like, what are you looking for? I said, whatever seems interesting. So he gave me 2 books. He said, here, go ahead and read it. I said, okay. I didn't care who the author was. All I knew that I had to spend 45 days in solitary confinement. Didn't look at the cover. I just opened it. And when I was reading, it was like I was that person that they was writing about. Every moment, every piece, I was that person. Whatever was happening around me, the screaming, the banging, the cells, keys jiggling while they walking down and saying, shut up. I didn't pay attention to none of that. What I paid attention to is the book I was reading. That book gave me life. It gave me something to be proud of. It gave me a way to escape from a criminal justice system, a broken criminal justice system that sent broken people in a criminal justice system. So when I read, I didn't know I was just reading. I would read until my eyes hurt. I would wake up, eat breakfast, and get back to reading. After that, I would work out. And I'd be like, you know what? I got to go read. Because I know he's coming back with new books. And one day, he gave me one book that changed my life. It was called The Secret. A lot of y'all know The Secret, right? So The Secret, I knew that at one point that I was mentally woke, but I wasn't spiritually and physically woke. And what I mean is that I knew that mentally I'm in a place that's bad, but I wasn't spiritually or physically woke, knowing that I could do something. That inside, that I could change the abilities of how I think, and I could go on the world and challenge it, no matter how many times I failed. So when I read that book, I skimmed through it. And I remember me reading it. It says, believe in yourself. No matter what, it will come to existence. And while you're in solitary confinement, you always get the nasty food. So I'm like, you know what? Tomorrow's Wednesday. I'm going to wish and I'm going to believe that I get coffee cake. And then the next morning, coffee cake came. I said, damn, that shit really works. The magic of a book is not what you do with it. It's what you actually take advantage of. Every single day, I didn't care who the author was. I read and I read. So I want to read you a quote. It says, what you are thinking now is creating your future life. So I hope New York State has around 54 prisons. I hope that we'll be able to bring back the imaginations that this broken criminal justice system has taken and broken from them. This is our opportunity to change lives. This is our opportunity to get people who thought that a book was just a book to a book to be their way of escaping. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fadal Guzman. The last person who's going to speak is William Ory, a comedian. Come on up to the stage. And if you're just joining us, welcome to the Asian American Writers Workshop. We are hosting a book drive for Books Through Bars in the back, and we're celebrating the launch of our new project, A World Without Cages. Thanks. Here's William.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Unfortunately, I won't be telling jokes, but I'm performing at 8 o'clock at Broadway Comedy Club. You can catch the show then tonight. Like many of the men I heard speak, I spent a lot of years in prison, a total of 30. I don't think I've been home 90 days now. I just left Attica after doing 12 years. Thank you. I'm extremely exhausted. I've been up since 3:45. I have to take a train 2 hours to get to work to Brooklyn, and I just worked 11 and a half hours loading stuff for a construction company. But this beats any day in prison, so I'm honored and blessed to be among you. Real quick, I met Daniel while I was in prison. I worked at the law library for several years, and he was another friend of mine named John Lennon, and I was trying to help an Asian gentleman out, Dr. Choi, and Daniel was an investigative reporter, so we was trying to see if we can do anything to help his cause, and it didn't go the way we wanted, but through that we developed a relationship, and we're furthering it from here on. In prison, what they have is called a pass-along life. That means if I have a magazine and I give it to someone in the cell next to me, you pass it along. Unfortunately, in a male's prison, a lot of guys like magazines that, you know, Playboy, stuff like that, and some of them read it for the articles or some look at the pictures. That was a joke. I was very fortunate also working in the law library. I got to meet so many people in the prison. I was very instrumental in helping them. Sometimes I would go to the yard, I would have to tell people to stop. You know, this is my workout time, this is my rest time. Also, I was the guy, whoever's been to Attica, there's no hot water there, so I would have to pour the water every 40 cells. I would pour hot water morning and nighttime. So I got to stay outside my cell a lot. And during this time, I developed relationships with men. And most of the guys would get arguments and yell, and the young man just mentioned he was in a gang. And there was so many men affected by the gangs. And what I realized that the heart of the matter is that they were looking for a family, a place to belong. So, and a lot of them couldn't read nor write. You know, sometimes I would read their mails, sometimes I would type up letters for them. And then after a while, I started telling my jokes in prison. I had a captive audience. Yeah, you got that one. So whether they liked it or not, I did it. And, you know, if they didn't like that, I'd do a little Shakespeare, anything to entertain the men there. And then I started reaching out to a lot of writers at the Harvard Lampoon. And, wow. Sarah Cato. She reached out to me. I saw her on a TV show called The Last Comic Standing, and I realized that she had went to Harvard. I'm also a Harvard graduate. She had went to Harvard, and I said, let me see if I can help her. And then she writes back a few days later, and she's working with the Lampoon, so I get published. And lo and behold, within a year, I start my own magazine called the Prisoners Lampoon. I have my second edition coming out in about 3 weeks, which I'll leave with Daniel, and he can forward copies to anyone who's interested. But when I started telling the men, I said, listen, tell a joke. A lot of them couldn't read. They didn't know how to put it together. So I said, let me come up with a bright idea. Do you know how to draw? No one knew how to draw. I said, can you do a stick figure? Everyone knew how to do a stick figure. And how do you say that fancy word? Genre? Let me hear it. Louder. There we go. I can never get that right. I came up with a genre called jailhouse comedy. So I got the guys to talk about their experiences, good, bad, and ugly in prison. And I have to say, this is adult material, and it is absolutely hilarious. Some of the most painful things that we go through to lighten the load, we have to actually laugh at it. In particular, every time we go off a search, you know, you have to come back, you have to drop your pants, you have to bend over. And certain officers took pleasure in actually just looking at you bending over. After a while, I said, he must be rating it. So he had a rating system. So I was like, okay, this is what they're doing now. But books for me, I pretty much read my whole life. But when I started coming to jail, I realized that I would read a book, a horror book, because I wanted to go to another world. And I usually, in the beginning, I always did something that sent me to the box. When you're in the box, I get to sleep all day and scream like an animal all night on my cell. And it worked. It got me through so many days. But like the gentleman before me that was sharing, it was the books that actually transcended my situation. I'm a big fan of Anne Rice. Do we have any Anne Rice fans here? No? There we go, there we go. Oh, the vampire Lestat, oh my God. I really thought that I can drink some blood the way she describes it. But because there's a digital divide in prison, and most of them say that the print media is dead, it's alive and well in prison. I also just got, I have 3 jobs actually. I write for a justice reform prison magazine called the Urban Life News. I believe I left some copies with you. And what I have to do is go out and look for stories. I'll be reporting on this as well. And in this magazine, this gentleman, fascinating young man, he spent 8 years in prison, but he still wanted to stay connected to the streets, but not selling drugs, robbing and pillaging and stuff like that. So he started realizing that there was a serious problem going on with the criminal justice system, where he said, okay, how can I reach out to them? And he started taking the stories, telling in a hip-hop fashion, because hip-hop is alive and well in this country. So, I'm so exhausted. I'm going to get off the mic, and that about shares it up. Thank you, guys.
Can we give another hand to William Morey? And to everybody else that shared their experiences. I mean, thank you again for coming. As we've just heard from 4 people who are in the room and people who are not in the room, and then at least one person who is actually no longer with us, we've heard about the importance of books while incarcerated. And as Mr. Guzman mentioned, there are 54 prisons in New York State. There are about 51,000 people incarcerated in those 54 prisons in New York State. And across the country, there are 2.2 million people behind bars. So think about the impact of books on each and every one of those 2.2 million people. This also doesn't include people in immigrant detention who get counted separately. So, so also keep that in mind as well, that number is much, much larger at this point. So when you are thinking about, the things that you are able to do, if you can donate books, if you are a reader, you probably also are one of those people that has lots of books in your house that you think that you are going to read again at some point and you never actually will. If they are paperback and in good condition, you may want to think about sharing those books with people who might not have anything to read otherwise and donate them to Books Through Bars. The Asian American Writers Workshop is doing their book drive till September 5th. You can also drop them off at the Books Through Bars space in Brooklyn during their packing sessions. If you have some extra money, you got a bonus, you found a $100 bill on the subway, whatever, consider the fact that sending thousands of packages through the U.S. postal system and paying for postage is very expensive. But as we've heard, it means so much to people inside to be able to get those books. So donate books, donate money. There are packing sessions, donate time. I mean, Danny and I have spent, I don't know how many nights in conditions like this when it is 96 degrees out, opening letters, filling requests, hauling heavy boxes of books around, and making sure that they went out so that somebody behind bars, many somebodies behind bars, had books to read. So thank you again for coming. Feel free to mingle. Feel free to talk to any of the folks that have been up on the stage tonight sharing their experiences. And thanks again.
Let's give another round of applause for Vicky Law. Thank you so much for co-hosting tonight. That's the end of our event. Drop off your books, make your donations, go have some bubble tea. Thank you again for coming. Thank you to the staff of the Asian American Writers Workshop. This would not have happened without you. And keep an eye out for A World Without Cages. We're going to be putting out a call for submissions very soon, and we'd love for you to pass it around. We want to hear fiction, nonfiction, poetry from folks who are incarcerated, about people who are incarcerated, and people in immigrant detention. So keep an eye out, and please stick around and talk to everybody here. There's a lot of writers and activists you'll want to meet. Thanks.